Mashiach comes. Whole different story. Okay, what we learned was about Malchus. Rav Tzadok makes this beautiful ha'ara that the lashon of the Gemara is Kishagavra Beis Malchus Chashmonayim v'nitzchum. That in the Chanukah story in the Gemara it says Kishagavra Beis Malchus Chashmonayim. That when the Beis Malchus of the Chashmonayim won the war against the Greeks, so the miracle of Chanukah happened. And Rav Tzadok asks, why is it called Kishagavra Beis Malchus Chashmonayim? The Malchus Beis Chashmonayim didn't start until after the Chanukah story. In fact, many years after the Chanukah story, according to Josephus. What happened, and I mean, just to fill in the blanks, in Josephus is that the Kohanim became heroes. Kohanim weren't heroes before; they were Kohanim. They became heroes because they took a stance and both a sociological stance and a philosophical stance and a military stance. They held the ground. They drew a line in the sand. They said Milah Hashem Elai, and they stopped the Greek occupation. So the Chashmonayim became heroes, and then eventually the Kohanim became so prominent that they became kings. They became the Malchus of Yisrael, which, as we know, was wrong. That was a wrong turn in history for Kohanim to become kings. It's, by the way, just agav, while we're here, historically, it's fascinating how it did turn, because it got to a point where Yanai Hamelech, there was a number of Yanai Hamelech. Yanai was like John. Yanai was like Paro. Yanai was the name of a melech, but they were all from the Yanai family, which was from the Yochanan family. So we made Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol, so his father was Yochanan, which would be in Greek Yanai. So it's interesting, that they, with all of their victory over the Greeks, they started becoming Yanai instead of Yochanan and Antignois, and they took all these Greek things upon themselves. And I think the reason for that is because we weren't really at war with the Greeks per se. We were at war with Jews becoming Greeks. And we were accepting certain Greek ideas. We accepted the mathematics of the Greeks. That wasn't the archaeology of the Greeks. We see it all over Yerushalayim. Greek architecture.
Architecture, the beauty.
The beauty of the Greeks. Yafta Lakim Liyefes was a bracha that Noach gave Yefes. But V'yishkai Ba'alei Shem. What bothered the Chashmonayim and the Dor was that how it assimilated little by little until that became our raison d'etre. That became our life. That became the secularism wasn't something which augmented the Yiddishkeit. I'm not making any political comments. I'm just saying what happened. But it seems that there was a contribution, if you will, from the FS to the Shem. That symbiotic relationship was meant to take place, and it did take place, and hence the biggest Tanoim were Rebbe Yanai. But they were all the Yanais were Nechodim of Yochanan, Batisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol. That was not the Yochanan Kohen Gadol who later on started when the corruption began. That was Yochanan Kohen Gadol, Sheshimesh b'kahuna shmeinim shana v'achar kach nasa tzeduki. That was not the father, I don't believe that was the father of Matisyahu. That was the grandson of Matisyahu, who was still called Yochanan. Shimish Beguna, Shmanim Shanav, L'Basayv Nasat Stuki. It wasn't, that was this is what happened when the Chashmonayim took over the Malchus. This historically, while I'm here, this was the birth of the Essenes. The Essenes, as the Christians like to call it, the Essenes, the Asyanim, as we call them. So the Asya, is everyone familiar with this piece of history? Essenes. We're familiar in yeshivas, we learn about the Prushim and the Tzadok, Pharisees and the Sadducees, two groups. There was a third group which was perhaps more important, and that's the group of the Asya. So what happened was that when the dafka for religious reasons, when the Beis Hamikdash started becoming corrupt, and the Kohanim had their hands in the pushka all the time, and too much Greek influence came into it. Dafka for good reasons, they ran out to the Dead Sea region. That's probably Yochanan Kohen Gadol, which was Shemesh B'Kahuna as a Pharisee, if you will, Shmonim Shonav Acher Kach Nasa Tzeduki. He probably didn't become a Tzeduki, but Tzeduki was a catch-all term for anybody who was not a Parushi, which was not the Pharisees. We're the Pharisees, just so you know. We are Pharisees. We are despised in the New Testament as Pharisees. Some of it unfairly and some of it fairly. But there was different groups that reacted to the corruption, which all took place in the Chashmonayim era. So this was all the grandchildren of Matisyahu and the Maccabees. Their grandchildren went from Kohanim to Malachim, to kings, and then everything became wrong. It went from Yochanan to Yanai, and everything became wrong. So when Yochanan Kohen Gadol, sorry for skipping around here, when Yochanan Kohen Gadol ran out to the Dead Sea region, to Qumran, and it was there that he became, in my understanding, he became John the Baptist, Yochanan John, and started his own little religion over there. Do you know, Agav, we're not here for comparative religion courses or Christianity 101, but I will say this. Again, it's the way my understanding of it. I'm not a scholar of Christianity, theology in general.
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. That's not what I do. But it's very fascinating. That when they, just a little bit of modern history, when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran, so Dead Sea Scrolls preceded Yashka by approximately 120, 130 years by all accounts. What was fascinating about that was that almost the whole New Testament was in it. Meaning it was a collection, the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you'll examine it, are a collection of psukim about Mashiach, mostly from Yeshayahu and Yirmiyahu and some of the other minor prophets. There were divrei Chazal, or divrei things that Chachamim always said and always knew, mostly about Mashiach and militants. Mashiach and militants. And a number of things from Sefer Ben Sira, which is not part of Chazal, but was considered Sifrei Chachma at the time, like Aristotle. Ben Sira was Sifrei, but much I think more chashuv to Chazal than Ben Sira. And there was this combination which made up the Dead Sea Scrolls, was almost sort of a Bible for those people that ran out to the Dead Sea in the time of Yochanan Kohen Gadol. It was a collection of what they believed. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered by Yigal Yadin, so the Church, the Vatican, became very, very nervous about this. It was very interesting to watch and to read about. The Vatican was very nervous, and they said that they're not allowed to be opened, they're not allowed to be examined for 30 years. There was a 30, which is just up now, which is why they're at the Israel Museum today. But now nobody cares anymore. But at the time, the Pope at the time became very, very nervous about the Dead Sea Scrolls. Akesh for the Dead Sea Scrolls. What was he so nervous about it? Because being that almost all of the New Testament is in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that means that the New Testament preceded the founder of Christianity by 150 years. So you know what happens? It takes the whole wind out of the religion. Because the whole chap was that Yashka had this new idea, this new prophecy, but he didn't. It wasn't new. It was something that he was makabel, much of it from us, as we know. You could go through there's a thing called, I presume most of you didn't read the New Testament. Some of you read the New Testament.
Stuck in Wheatland, Wyoming for a week.
The hotel's the only thing in the drawer. You read the Gideon Bible. We'll talk about the Gideons in a different year. Talk the Gideons in a different year. But there is a thing called the New Testament has, there's many editions, of course, of the Testament, but there's an edition called the Red Letter Bible. So it's fascinating because what it is anything that Yashka himself said is in red letters. So you can read the whole thing in about 45 minutes and just like, what did he say? And the question is, what did he say? What did he actually say? Almost everything that he said were either Chazal. I'm not talking about now the apostles. I'm not talking about the whole Chazal. Like what he himself said. From our point of view, Divrei Musar, which appears in Chazal and some Divrei Mashiach, and he spoke against hypocrisy a lot, which was fair enough to speak about hypocrisy. Sort of Yirmiyahu Lahavdil. So it wasn't like such a big Kiddush. There is no great Kiddush to it except for what was made out of it afterwards. So this was something that became very, very clear with the Dead Sea Scrolls. The world is so non-scholarly and non-scholastic that it really doesn't make any difference. Because after 30 years with the whole Gilui of the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay, has anybody here gone and examined the Dead Sea Scrolls? I actually did. Trying to figure out what's going on there. But the point is that this new sect started called the Asyanim, and probably from the correct Jewish way to understand it is that the founder of what became Christianity went and joined the Asyanim, left the Brushim and left the Asyanim. Similar to his Rebbe Yochanan Kohen Gadol, that was Shemesh B'Kehuna Shemanim Shanu B'Sayf Nasa Tzaduki. So it was all this whole new brand that came up at the time. That's one interesting historical thing, which was interesting. Yeah.
Yochanan Kohen Gadol was running away from the corruption of the Beis Hamikdash. Why was he criticized for that?
First of all, who said he was criticized?
I mean,
he said,
you should be careful not to be like...
He said, Al Tavid Ba'atz V'chad Yoy B'Sasa. Over Yochanan Kohen Gadol.
He was criticizing himself.
Yes. Al Tavid Ba'atz Yoy B'Sasa. You never know. That's what he was saying.
What should he have done differently?
But first of all, you don't, because if you have complaints, but anyways, if you have complaints against the establishment, you don't go become something else. Fix the establishment.
He said Al Tavid before or after?
He said as during.
No,
but I was just like a basic yesod, like one of my pet peeves in life. If you don't like something, so fix it. You don't leave. If you're in a shul, this shul, the next shul, whatever, if you don't like something, so do something to make it better. We vote with our feet, we leave. This is not the way to do it. So you don't leave the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is the Makam of the Shlita. The Beis Hamikdash is Yerushalayim HaKodesh. The Beis Hamikdash is established by David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. They don't leave right out to the Dead Sea. That's how Teva. So they couldn't take that kind of a pressure. Went and started something else, and Yatsa Harvard Yisrael. It didn't become a Harvard. Millions of Jews were killed in this process over the centuries. But I just want to make one other interesting historic point, that the Gemara Kedusha Daf Sadach, just while I'm here, the Gemara says that Yanai HaMelech, who was the son of, he was one of the Yanai HaMelech, went and the Melucha of the Chashmonayim was very, very successful and very, very wealthy, became very, very wealthy. It says that he went to a place outside of Eretz Yisrael, the Kavash, and he was Kavash, the Mar Kiddushin, Sanachim basically. He went and he was Kovesh 60 big cities outside of Eretz Yisrael. And he came back and he made a big celebration. And the Chachamim came to this celebration. And there was one Russia, the Gemara calls him a Russia, who was sitting there. And he was in all of his glory and his melucha and the kochi votes of Yadi of the thing of Israel. Now that I'm the king of Israel, it's unbelievable what we're able to take over the whole world. And there was one guy there who said, "Aval chachamim loy moedim b'cha," but the chachamim don't hold of you. He's burning in hell, this guy. The Gemara says that this is a Russia. It says Leiv Ra, Moach Ra. The Gemara says all kinds of terrible things about this person. He says, why would you say that? Why would you say that the Chacham don't hold of me? So he said Tivdoik b'shem shebein einecha, the tzitz, because he was wearing the tzitz. See if they hold you as a tzitz. So he went to random Chachamim, and he said, I'm the Kohen Gadol. So you understand what was going on in the politics? This was the king of Israel, the warrior of Israel, the one who was making the big Sudas for everybody. He was also the kind gadol. And in fact, the Chacham said to him, there were trick takers to say to him, they said, Yanai Malka, they said to him, Yanai HaMelech, Hanach Keser Kahuna, and be the Melech. Like, what do you need the Keser Kahuna for? What was their cheshbon? Their cheshbon was, look, you're really doing well as a Melech. We want the Beis HaMikdash to be a Makom Tahar and a Makom Naki. We don't want it, so Hanach, leave the Kahuna for somebody else. You take the Keser Melucha. They should have really said the other way around. They should have said, you're a Kohen, you're not a Melech. Chashmonayim are not supposed to be Melachim. But they didn't have a chance with that. They were Melachim. It's a Metzias that they were Melachim. But Kohanim, you don't have to be. Halach v'harag kol hachachamim. He killed kol hachachamim. Some say means he killed the whole base. He killed whatever. He killed tons of people. It was a horrible, horrible thing that this guy was goring. The Gemara blames it on this Eliezer ben Popaya, I think his name was. But so he was a bad person.
This is the same guy who was Shimon HaTzadik Kohen Gadol? It was Yochanan.
Son.
This is the son of.
Son, I believe, son Ben Eliezer Hyrcanus. So his grandson maybe. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's fascinating how things turned around throughout history. And here is the Chachamim saying to him, not don't be a king, but don't be a Kohen. If the Kohanim would have stayed Kohanim, the kings would have, the Chashmonayim should not have become. So the heroes became the heroes, and the heroes became the kings, and wanted to have the Kahuna also. They wanted both Kesarim, the Keser Malchus and Keser Kahuna. Keser Torah was Alatzah. Keser Torah was a threat. Three Shloisha Kesarim. Keser Kahuna, Keser Melucha, Keser Torah. The Keser Torah was killed because there shouldn't be a Keser, which is not Ba'adi. So a lot of this has to be the most fascinating, whoever's version you want to take of it. Josephus's version, the Gemara's version, my version, whatever version you want to take of it. It's trying to put the pieces together. This is where the birth of Christianity, which became somewhat of a nemesis, so many different groups, they always talk about the Tzedukim and the Prushim and the Asyonim as if there was like three groups. By the time of the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, there was, my friend Matis Cantor, who's a historian in Australia, somehow counted through all the Midrashim, I think something like 96 groups that Klal Yisrael divided into. He proves it. He has a history book.
Sounds like the Knesset.
Like the Knesset, exactly like the Knesset. It just went in every different direction and fighting and arguing and Sinaskhina. All of this, the whole Chanukah story ended up in Tisha B'Av. That's where it ended up. It ended up in Tisha B'Av, where they kept the Beis HaMikdash for 200 years, but it was a Beis HaMikdash of Machlokes. And it was a Beis HaMikdash of fighting over the money and fighting over the kavod and fighting over the malchus and the kahuna, and it was fighting. Ache higia advarim to the time of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, where it was sinas chinam. So Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Kodesh Baruch Hu says that this whole thing, lo bishvili, like Chanukah candles instead.
We find the seeds of this in the original Chashmonayim. It's something that could predict this.
I think you find the seeds in Korach.
Look, the Gemara calls them tzaddikim. I think there's a Musar Haskell here, which is so deep that I don't understand that it's too difficult to articulate. But sometimes, I just to say that sometimes people do very great things, and the people rally behind them. And they get, how does the Peters principle go? They get to the
level of incompetence.
They get to the level of incompetence very, very quickly. Like sometimes the heroism, just said, okay, dialogue. We restored the Beis HaMikdash. We restored the Kahuna. Shem Zayisach. We did a beautiful thing. That's big. Now let's go back to our avodah. But it's such a Musar Haskell because I believe it repeats itself, not just in history, in the macro picture of Klal Yisrael, but in the micro. picture of Klal Yisrael. It happens to us also. We do something great. It was a nice novice. What had to be done, something had to be done at that moment. But doesn't mean you should go ahead and become a king. You did a good thing. Doesn't mean, you know.
Malchus, the Klal Yisrael is the Kodesh Baruch Hu's Malchus. And so the mess with it very
I don't understand what you're saying.
If the message that if they're going to assume the Malchus, there has to be perhaps, in retrospect, more thoroughly thought out.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
At the time of the Chashmonayim, were there any representatives of Beit David? Might have assumed the Malchus.
I don't know if it matters.
In an effort to be appointed.
The Museum of Klal Yisrael that eventually came out, Hillel.
Yeah, but that was later, wasn't it?
Later, but towards the end of the Beis Hamikdash. We're not talking a long period of time. We're talking about 200 years. That's
Right.
good stuff in Jewish history. You know, it's something to be Jewish because, I always mention this when you drive around in the United States through all these little towns, historic town founded 1897.
Yeah.
That's historic. we go 2,000 years, 3,000 years historic, 1897. It's an artist, what's the big deal, historic town? They have an old house there. 200 years, the whole thing was 200 years. In those 200 years came Malchus Beis David. It's an important thing to understand that the Nesiim of Klal Yisrael, Hillel, even before Hillel, but certainly Hillel, all the way to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, prided themselves in being from Malchus Beis David. Now Hillel was from Malchus Beis David, Mishpachas Beis David, let's say, I believe Min Ha'ain. The Gemara says that Matzah Megillah, Starm, they found in the archive somewhere, they found a Yichus brief that Hillel came from Beis David. This was a very, very important thing because it was an effort of restoration to Malchus Beis David. Of course, let's not miss the elephant in the room here, even though, as I say, I'm teaching Judaism, not Christianity. But the whole Christianity was based on the idea of let's go back to Malchus Beis David, isn't it? Isn't that the first pasuk of the New Testament? Nobody knows. Okay. That's what it says. That's the yichus of it starts off with the yichus of Yashka, which is a ridiculous pasuk because again it's yichus b'nai. They supposedly didn't have a father. So hello. But okay. You can Malchus Beis David if you don't have a father. Right? The immaculate swear is not so immaculate after all. But it's not my kasha. It's already. But it's just so interesting that the whole thing was all about Davidic dynasty. The whole thing was about the Davidic dynasty. That was the whole. Let's go get a meaning. Let's get away from the Chashmonayim. So it was this corruption that not only caused sinas chinam, that not only caused the Chorban Beis Hamikdash, but actually caused the Asyanim, and then afterwards the different religions. And it wasn't just one. That one became popular. Many religions that popped out of this, all trying to get back to Malchus Beis David. The antidote to that was Hillel Hazakeh. It was our Hillel and his son Gamliel and his son Rav Shimon ben Gamliel and the Gamliel family, which was a Davidic family, and even Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai negotiated with Vespasian. At the end, let's go 200 years, fast forward 200 years, he negotiated with Vespasian, the Romans already, not Greeks, and he said to him, give me three things. Famous. Listen to the words, by the way. Tein Asya L'Tzadik, which your Schottenstein will translate, give medicine to Rabbi Tzadok, not this Rabbi Tzadok, the one at the time of the Gemara, who had fasted for 40 years over the corruption that was going on at the time. Tein Asya, why is it called Asya? Because those guys in Qumran that ran out to the Dead Sea, they had different characteristics to them. One of them was that they were healers. Hence, the whole Christianity is all based on healing. Healing is a big part of Christianity. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for Asya which is, there's a Jewish medical organization, I always find it a little bit funny, Jewish medical organization here in Israel called Asya. Because whatever the Gemara says they needed medicine, they used to go to the Dead Sea because those were the healers. But I don't think a Jewish organization should be called Asya if we're a bunch of Prussian. What are we doing with Asya? Those were the doctors. Those were the doctors, and we had no access to them because there was a siege on Yerushalayim, and we weren't allowed to go out. So he said, bring me a doctor from Asya for Tzadok, because that's where the medical people were. That's where the healers were. That's where the doctors were. They have to go out to the Dead Sea, into the caves of Qumran. So the history is fantastic that went on. Keep getting myself off track. Let's just learn a little bit aside. Another fascinating point. Kvar Amarnu, we have already said, Shehem, that the Yevanim, Hayu Beklipa, Zelu Mazek Nege Kedushas Torah Shabal Peh. Okay, that's a wild idea. Chachmas Yevanis, we view it as in one side of the room, and Chachmas HaTorah, Torah Shabal Peh on the other side of the room, and that never should they meet. So, clear in the Zohar, by the way, is that the Chachma of Yevanis, which is called Chachmas Chitzonius, B'Medayik, Chachmas Chitzonius, outside Chachma. Why? Because the Klippa is on the outside. You have a Pneim, and you have a Pneim. The Klippa is on the outside. The Chachma of Yevanis, which is why we did adopt not much of it. Remember we learned in the Netziv last week that the 7 Kanim of the Menorah are connected to the 7 Chachmas that you need to learn Torah. We're not an anti-math. I'm anti-math because I'm too lazy to try to understand it, but that's philosophically, we're not anti-mathematics or good architecture for that matter. We're not anti any of the 7 chachmas which the Greeks mastered. But we know that they're chachmas chitzonios. They can never become the pnimios. Yafta likim liyefes b'yishkon ba'al le'shem. Mosa yaf yefusay shel yefes, as the Gemara, kishi yishkon ba'al le'shem. The whole beauty is the beauty when it's coming as a klipa to the al le'shem. So build a shul according to Shem. You want to know what the shul should look like, how the beauty of it? Get yourself a Greek. Yafta likim liyefes kishi yishkon ba'al le'shem. Where is the place? Where's the place? Noach said, the way the Gemara understands it. Where is the place for Yefes? Yishkei Ba'alei Shem, because Noach put the 2 together in one bracha. Masa Yaf Yefusa Shel Yefes. When is this Yaf Yefusa Yofi? There's no beauty out to itself. It's a klipa. So comes the Zohar, and he's quoting Kvar Amarnu. He quoted the Zohar. Shehem these Yevanim Hayu B'Klipa. Zelu Mazek Neged Kedushas Torah Shabal Peh. Something deeper about the klipa. They were keneged the Torah Shabal Peh. Torah Shabal Peh was the inside, not Torah Shabal Torah Shabal Peh was the fruit, the inside. The klipa was Chachmas Chitzonius. Shimon HaTzadik. The founder of Torah Shabal Peh, as we understand it, was Shimon HaTzadik. But Shimon HaTzadik was Mishiyarei Knesses HaGadolah, and Shimon HaTzadik was, so what you had is, in other words, Ezra was the one that brought Klal Yisrael from the Gola, Ezra and Nehemiah, back into Eretz Yisrael, started the Anshe Knesses Hagdola. The Anshe Knesses Hagdola has been machlokas. How long did that go on? Meaning, how long was it from Ezra to Shimon HaTzadik? Anywhere between 200 years and 20 years, depending on how firm you are. But we can leave that machlokas aside. That's where those 160 mysterious years are missing right over there, because it doesn't seem mistaver to historians that Shimon HaTzadik met Alexander the Great. And I'm sorry, I probably did meet Alexander. It doesn't seem mistaver that he met Ezra. It's not mistaver in history. Okay, no, it's not our subject. But the point is that by starting the Anshe Knesses Hagdolah, he was the founder of Torah Shabal Peh. At that time, so from there came, if you follow Pirkei Avos, Perek Aleph, you'll see how Torah Shabal Peh developed, based, of course, on Torah Shabbat and the Messiah that they received from Ezra, and Ezra took it through the Gola. He had it from Mordechai HaTzadik. As the Rambam says in the introduction to the Mishnah Torah, tells us exactly how the Messiah didn't get lost during that time of Golus. Ubiyamav, in the time of Shimon HaTzadik, Haya, who? Alexandrus Muktan, was Alexander the Great. We know the story. Alexander the Great came into Eretz Yisrael, and Shimon HaTzadik went to meet him. And the Gemara tells us the story that when Shimon HaTzadik came to meet Alexander the Great, the leader of all of Yiddishkeit, meeting the leader of the world, and Alexander the Great came prepared to, like he did every place that he went to, for military occupation, and to take over Eretz Yisrael militarily and kill who knows how many people. Shimon HaTzadik, Gadol Tzadik, went to meet Alexander the Great with his Talmidim, and Alexander the Great with his army, and they met. He was coming up from the Negev, Alexander the Great. When they met, and we know exactly where they met, and Afitfar, you can go there, you can see this exact makom where they met, and the most unlikely miracle in the world happened, that Alexander the Great, for the first time in his life, got off his high horse, and bowed down to Shimon HaTzadik. He saw him as a malach. Not only as a malach, but as the malach, Daika, that wins his wars, that appears to him whenever he is a war. Alexander the Great was having Bashuna the God Slach in the world. He was being Matzliach, taking over to the Welt. And why? It had something to do, this is the deep part of it, had something to do with the Shimon HaTzadik. Why did it have something to do with it? Because I'm the Klipa and you're the Pri. The Klipa meets the Pri. Not Chanukah. You understand what was happening over here from Shemayim? The Klipa met its Pri. It wasn't just like a miracle. It was, this is why I'm conquering the world. So he was machnia himself to the Pri, which is exactly what should happen. And everybody was like, what are you doing on the floor, Alexander the Great? The Great! We don't call him the Great, by the way. Alexander Muktan means Alexander the Macedonian, however you're supposed to pronounce it. But the Welt called him Alexander the Great. The Great is bowing down to its Pri. You're the one I'm protecting. A Klipa is there to protect the Pri. You're the one I'm protecting. So here we have two forces of the world meeting at this exact moment. Alexander Muktan and Shimon HaTzadik. Va'az hischila. It was at this moment, says Rav Tzadok. That's, by the way, all that is a Gemara in Yom HaSamach Tes. Va'az hischila chachmas yivanis. Chachmas yivanis began to take off during that period. Al Yedei Aristotle, this teacher of Alexander the Great, was Aristotle. He was an Aristotelian. The whole camp of Alexander the Great in taking over the world was not to make money, to do it. It wasn't to make money, and it wasn't to have military might. It was to teach the teachings of Aristotle to the world. That was his purpose. It was all to teach the teachings of Aristotle, which was teachings of culture and unity and really developing the human being into something which is very, very special. Even God was in the writings of Aristotle the Great. What he didn't know was the Chachmas HaTorah. He didn't have Torah. On this, the Gemara says, Chachma b'goyim tamen. Torah b'goyim al tamen. They have klipa. It's chachmas chitzonius. It's what you need. It's the tools of logic that you need to be able to enter into the Pri and eat this Pri. He met the Pri. That was so Aristotle, very interesting, believed in God, but he didn't believe in hashgacha pratis. Hashem's involvement in this world was not his area. His area was the chitzonius. The chitzonius was God created the world, walked away. It was the Chachamim, the Chachmei HaTorah, which understood the Hashgacha Pratis, understood that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in every minute of our lives. And if anybody goes to say that, L'dati, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not involved in every minute of our lives for Klal Yisrael, you're feeding right into Chachmas Yivanis.
So I understand.
You've got to be careful with that, because a lot of people do that. Feeding right into Chachmas Yivanis. The Bechira Chavshus, which is Emes, was the father of Aristotle. It's all man has his choices. But not to the exclusion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Hashgacha Pratis. As an aside, we're going to talk about that a little more.
How did he recognize it in the Shimon HaTzadik?
How did he see it?
Yeah.
The Ruach HaKodesh.
Dreams.
In his dreams, he said it once, right?
He said he saw him in dreams. He saw him in dreams. I don't know if he understood what he saw as well as we understood what he saw. But maybe he did. It was in Leib Malach and Bashamayim. What goes on, goes on.
Did he tell Aristotle his dreams?
Hmm?
Did he tell Aristotle?
Aristotle was dead. By the time he was worrying around, but he was a warrior. This is the perspective that I want to understand. He was Shema in a certain way. He was a holy warrior. He was a warrior for Aristotle. He was a warrior for Chachma. That's why the Greeks, unlike the Romans or the Babylonians, the Greeks were about Chachma and culture. Look, we can respect this. Don't we respect the United States of America that tries to give an education to every single child, and you actually get in trouble if you play hooky? It was so important to all the nations of the world. It was extremely important that were they were barbarians. He was going into a barbaric world. He was going to a world of cannibals and teaching them culture. It was a good thing. This Klippa was a good thing. The only thing is, he came to Klal Yisrael. Look, sorry, we don't need it. We're not barbarians. We're not cannibals. We're not boiling our kids up in pots. We're people, because he met the pneumius, he met the pre of his klipa. But here's the point. Let's get to the point here. And this is so mind-boggling. Aristotle, look at the covenant. Aristotle was the klipa of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Shagam Heim Chitshu B'Gavon, because they were also being Mechadesh in the same way that we are Mechadesh. Chachma u'Musar milibam banhagas derech eretz menschlichkeit derech eretz. This was all in the Greek Aristotelian teaching. Now, Kain Ratzu Eim Levatel Torah Sheba'al Peh Yisrael. The Greeks, as they understood it, and the post-Alexander the Great movement understood this, the Torah Sheba'al Peh as a competition. So let me just explain what this is. This is very important. Different parts, different times in history, where we're holding at a certain place in history, where we're holding in history at the time of Shimon HaTzadik, Alexander the Great, where we're holding in history is a Hisgalus of Isarusa de Lusata. We're holding at the time of Revelation. Remember where we are. We're in the time of Shimon HaTzadik. The Jews just came back to Israel. What's supposed to happen now? Ezra, Tikein Lam L'Israel. Ezra was like the second Moshe Rabbeinu, but Ezra was the Moshe Rabbeinu of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Moshe Rabbeinu of Torah Sheba'al Moshe Rabbeinu Torah Sheba'al. Not that there wasn't a Torah Sheba'al Peh, of course there was, but he took this Masorah of Torah Sheba'al Peh and the exegetical ability, which was very, very, that's even a Greek word, by the way, which was all about the hermeneutics. It was all about using logic to decipher something. This is the Yud Gimel Dvar, Shatar Didreshes, perhaps. Not that we got it from the Greeks. We were doing it, they were doing it, because that was the energy at that time. There was an energy going out of the world of Chidush. And on the Gentile side, the Klippa was Aristotle and Alexander the Great. And on the Jewish side were Divrei Chachamim, was the Anshe Knesset Agdola, Shimon HaTzadik, Pirkei Avos. Well, we were doing the same thing. Now, Alexander the Great himself was Bakr the Chachma and was good to the Jews. Shimon HaTzadik took him, gave him a tour of Eretz Yisrael, Yerushalayim. It must have been a beautiful mamad. I believe the Jews must have come out into the streets of Yerushalayim and made a bracha on him. Pasha to me. I was on the streets on Rehov Yafa when I made a bracha on Sadat after the peace treaty. Yeah, he said the story is like this. He said, look, this is beautiful, the Beis HaMikdash is beautiful, and I'm not going to touch it. This is pristine, it's pure. You don't need Greek culture. He was a young guy, Alexander the Great. He died at 35, 36 years old. But he was old enough, apparently, to appreciate that this is not necessarily. He says the only thing is that every country I go to has a Alexandria of Egypt. Every country has an Alexandria because I was here. The graffiti for Alexander the Great. Alexander was here. And L'chol HaPachas, he said, let's do this. Let's make this pshara for my kavod in the Beis Hamikdash. Let's put up a statue of me, of Alexander the Great. There'll be a big statue, and at least this way we'll have the kiyum of the pasuk of Yafta L'kim Li'efes V'ish Koy Ba'al Le'shev. Let me be the Al Le'shev. So Shimon HaTzadik told him, listen, we don't do statues. Let's come up with a second idea. What's the backup? Because statues of people, it's a big dish. It's not going to work. It's not going to go.
Says street and sun gardens.
Huh?
Says street and sun gardens.
Good. Came the street and sun gardens.
Yavam is Tzion without the tzaddik. We already have our tzaddikim.
So the Pshar, Shimon HaTzadik says all the boys will be born this year, right, on Alexander. Show you how important how much chashivas we give you. It became a Jewish name. Alexander became a Jewish name. I have a son, Alexander. Alexander Ziskin. Gematria, Ramach, and Shasa. Alexander Ziskin. So, Ramach. Alexander was Ramach, I believe. I think it's figured out. Alexander is Ramach. Unbelievable. So, that was the energy of Alexander the Great and Shimon HaTzadik. But the energy, the Klippa and the free began to feel a competition with each other. What's important for us to understand is that when it's time for something to happen, this is quantum mechanics 101. When it comes time for something to happen in this world, it happens. Now the question is, who's grabbing it? Who's going to unpackage it? Who's going to take this new idea, which is coming as a ruach min hashamayim, and is it going to be used for tov or is it going to be used for ra? The Zohar predicts exactly, almost to the year. The Zohar is 2,000 years old. Predicts the Industrial Revolution. Bishnas, and this year there will be a revolution, and the revolution will change the industrial. And if it's taken by tzaddikim, it'll bring the Mashiach. If it's taken by the Rishonim, it'll bring war. It'll bring killing. It'll bring hariga. It's clear the Zohar. Tough, pay. This before the Zohar. The idea is that an energy comes from the Shamayim, and now it's up to us. Isarusa de lasata. It's like Shabbos, to take the Sheishis Yavim Tasav Lachtecha and to turn it into a Davar Shel Kedusha. So the Greeks were doing theirs, and the Jews are doing ours. If they would have gotten together as they did with Alexander and Shimon HaTzadik, they would have understood it's a klipa and a pri. It works together, just like Yaakov and Esav could work together, if they understood it. But instead it became competition and it became war. So you needed the Chashmonayim to come and say, hello, we're not Greeks. The Misyavnim was a mixing of Greek and Torah, as opposed to this is a klipa, this is a pri. It became blurred. This is not good. So let's just sum it up, because Tuesday we're going back to regular Kedusha Shabbos. But there's so much to understand about the Chanukah story and the Malchus based Chashmonayim and the Greek aspect and what it was that we were fighting and why there were Misyavnim, and it was the Misyavnim that we were fighting, and it was all about this blur that took place between the Jews and the Greeks. But what is emes is this. What is emes, this is emes forever, is that the Chachmas HaYavanis is called Chachmas Chitzonius, and the Chachma of Klal Yisrael is called Chachmas Pnimius, and Torah Shebal Peh is not against it, it's keneged it, meaning it's keneged, it's like almost like the Isha, which is kenegdoi. It could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. If it's used, if you look in the Hakdama of the Pasach Shulchan, where it talks about the Gra, then know every single Chachma. There's the Zayin Kanei HaMenorah, know every single Chachma, but it was all used as a tool to get into Torah. The minute it becomes something separate of Torah, like a Chachma unto itself, then it's not a kiyum of the world any longer. The whole purpose of this Chachma was to serve as a klipa, klipa is not a bad thing. The dust just you can't eat it onto itself. The klipa, and there's even klipas noiga, could be very, very close. But it has to remain in its perspective. It has to remain the protection. So this was the Chashmonayim, the original Chashmonayim, the tzaddikim that divided the issue. You're a klipa, stay over there. You're Jews, stay over here. Just like in vital, like the motto of Chanukah is, the Chazal say that Hashem told Aaron, "Shalcha gadol mishalahem, atamad l'kes haneiros." Shalcha gadol mishalahem. It's like that's the words that you have to walk out of Chanukah with. Your portion is bigger than their portion. What's their portion? Could mean the other Nesiim, which were connected, by the way, the Shivim was, or it can be Shalcha. We as Jews, we don't have to be at battle with Chachmas Chitzonius. We just have to know that it's not our place. It's a waste, in my opinion. It's a waste of a Jewish mind and a Jewish heart to not develop Torah Sheba'al Peh and use the Chachmas Chitzonius as the klipa, but it's a waste to just go into the klipa without completely giving our part and participating in the process of Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is Isarusa de Lasata. That's our tachlis. That's what we're for. That's what we were created for. So we want to use something which is not our tachlis. I remember like the first month I became a rabbi. I was 22, something like that, 22 years old. I became a rabbi in America. And it was bothering me that the grass outside the shul was growing so high, nobody was taking care of. So I took the lawnmower and I went outside. And I was just a kid, 21, 22 years old, and the grass was bothering me. I remember then the president of the shul who hired me came and said, "Don't cut the grass. We could hire somebody down the street to cut the grass. We brought you from Yerushalayim to teach Torah." I was right because so why don't you cut the grass or hire a guy already? But the point is that Shalcha gadol mishalahem. You have a different tachlis. It's a whole different price range if you're hiring somebody to cut the grass. So is it important to cut the grass? Of course, that's the beautiful klipa of the shul. Is that the job of the Kohen to go into Malchus? Wrong job. It's the wrong job, and it's a waste. So we got to make sure we're doing the right job, and the right job. So here's Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. I touched up the whole thing in one sentence. They asked Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, they asked him at the end of the second Bayit, they said, Ma lilmoid chachmas chitzonius. Okay, you're allowed to learn chachmas chitzonius. Says Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, matzasa l'chazman. Ksiv, v'gisa b'yoyim v'layla. Imatzasa l'chazman, shaloi min hayoyim, v'loi min halayla, till my chachmas chitzonius. The halach is v'gisa b'yoyim v'layla. So you got to find a time, which is somehow like Zman Shelo Yom V'lo Laila. So it's a bit of a joke, but what does it say when Mashiach comes? Yavo Yom Tarpiyut on Erev Pesach Shehu Lo Yom V'lo Laila. There is a time when there is a symbiotic relationship between the Chachmas Chitzonius and the Chachmas Pnimius. Yavo Yom Shehu Lo Yom V'lo Laila. Or Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said, right now we have to develop what we have. But it wasn't a negativity. It was just nishperons. It's not for us. We could do more. If you could be healing people by doing brain surgery and keep people alive, what do you cut in the grass? It's a bisbus to be Isaac in the klipa when you can be Isaac in the pnim. And that's our tachlis. That's our b'shavas. So we're created for.
So Shimon HaTzadik was correct and the Chashmonayim was correct. Basing it on at that time,
they were correct, but it was...
they were saying that that was correct. No? That was one like the next sentence.
The what?
The guilt test that could be read in Yom Tov.